love the crazy fads, like England always buggering up, but you know we're gonna win the World Cup. I'm gonna start my own nation with myself a reservation. I'm gonna start my own nation with myself a reservation.
Keep the red flag flying here.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Political Unmuted. My golly, we've got a show for you tonight. The heck, the things that we're talking about. Before we start, I have to make an apology. Can you remember that the week before last, I got Neil Gibb and Mark Gibb muddled up? I got the wrong name for the secretary, Nick Gibb, the Secretary of State, muddled up, and it caused havoc, and I had to apologise for that last week. But last week, I got muddled up between Sarah Lancaster and Sarah Lancashire. Now, what you have to understand, people, is that when you're your age, you think, oh, what a silly mistake I've made. When you're my age, everybody thinks, Alzheimer's is going bonkers, and sort of quickly get him an easy chair and a pair of slippers. So it's terribly worrying, but Paul has instructions to get rid of me when my mind eventually goes. So sorry to Sarah. Was it Lancashire? Lancaster? Which is it? Come on, you know.
I don't know.
Anyway, whoever it was, I apologise to her as well. I shall try and get through this week without making any huge mistakes. And welcome to you all. It's just fantastic to see you all joining in. And why don't I stop chuttering and introduce you to my wonderful guests and my new guest that's obviously been on the show before, but we're so pleased, Chantal, to welcome you. Hello. How are you? How are you keeping?
I'm good, busy, good. I've been dying to get on, and I had a Tuesday free, and I was like, can I be a guest? And you said yeah, which is great.
Oh, no, it's our privilege. What have you been up to recently? Just fill us in with quickly.
So I've been on tour with a theatre company doing a tour about stop and search and leaving workshops with young people around the rights around stop and search. And then there's some more recent stuff that I'm sure I'll talk about in response to things that have been happening in the region. But yeah, the good stuff is the stop and search tour.
Right, that's just brilliant. Sort of well done. Sort of something I would love to do but never dared. Welcome, Paul. Hello, boss. How are you?
Sorry, before we go on, John, she's been on the news as well, and she's like,
have you been?
Like a proper panelist, haven't you, on a couple of news things?
Oh, are you talking about me, Paul? I really can't hear you. I don't know why. Were you asking if I've been a panelist?
Yes.
Oh yeah. I went on GMTV, I don't know what it's called, the one that's on in the morning
Good
with
Morning
Susanna.
Britain, that one.
Good Morning
Britain, yeah, to talk about the police, because the police have been in the news a lot, and I've been on like the BBC and things, so yeah, and all the things that I've been saying, they've finally gone mainstream now, so they'll let me on the telly.
I'll have to ask you your autograph. Thank you so much for coming on our little humble show. It's absolutely great. Already people are showing the love for you, but everybody's helping me out as well. It's Lancashire, apparently. Thank you. Paul, the boss, lovely to see you. Okay, everything all right?
Yeah, I'm good. People are saying I'm a bit quiet, I think, so I'm going to try and change my volume. So we'll see if that works. Is that better?
It's a bit better, yes. Yeah. Just have to stop mumbling. That's all. Are you on half term?
No, that's next week, and then I'm going to Greece for half term. I'm going on a training camp. So yeah.
Are you taking the family with you? Is it just?
No, it's just me and a group of paramilitary people. You know, we're on a training camp. I'm kidding about the paramilitary side of it. It's a cycling training camp, so yeah, I'm gonna go and ride my bike in Greece for a week. So it's really nice of Laura to say go away from the family during half term. I'm gonna really, really miss them, but I've never done that before and lived
Oh,
like a pro cyclist for a week to see how good I could never have been. So
oh, that's really exciting. And Jane, sort of everybody's favourite panelist. Chantal, I'm so sorry. You're going to have to break this to you, but everybody loves Jane. You're going to have to be really good to outshine Jane. How are you, Jane?
I'm good. I haven't done anything interesting this week, so I'm feeling a little bit left out of this.
Don't worry at all. They need us stay-at-home people. I haven't noticed at all. Right, and so let's begin and get on with the show. Chantal, I'm going to go straight in and dump you in it. What was your moment of the week this week?
This week, it can't be a happy one, I'm sorry, but this week's just been a really heavy week in terms of things that have been happening locally. So we've obviously had the Knowsley riot, and then more recently, a young girl called Brianna Gay was killed in a park. So I've just come from the vigil for that, and although it was really, really sad, there were like thousands of people who turned up and just sat in solidarity. So it's not a happy one, but it was really nice to see the community come together and kind of be together in solidarity. So that's my moment of the week, because it was beautiful. The vigil was beautiful, and huge big up to Felix Mufti Wright for putting that vigil on. It was amazing.
You know, I had a thought about that, and it was a thought I felt bad about, because this poor child has died, and what the family must be going through, and a life snuffed out. Your heart breaks, but what is good coming out of it is that there's been a huge upswelling of support for trans people and trans rights, and an understanding of the situation they're in. I mean, was that evident at the vigil?
So it was a silent vigil, but just looking around, like we've got a really active trans community in Liverpool who are absolutely amazing. But there were a lot of people from, allied communities. So there were a lot of people who were, like Black Lives Matter and different organisations, pensioners associations. So there was loads of solidarity. And as you say, it's really highlighted the whole narrative that's been of fear and hate, and gone, well, actually, what a lot of us have been saying, and what the trans community have been saying at the top of the voices, is that they're really, really vulnerable, especially to hate crimes like the one we've seen. So it's kind of, it's awful what's happened, but it's really put a spotlight on these conversations that have been going on for some years.
Sort of, hopefully a turning point. Sort of something good come out of it, but it just upset me so much seeing it. Paul, moment of your week.
I could have a few, but I'll probably mention a few during the show. I think I'll go for my MP. It's almost like a thing that my MP decides to be a Walter Mitty, so someone who cosplays as someone in the military. So Phil Wilson used to do this regularly when he was the Labour MP for our area. He used to go and dress up in a little army man uniform and pretend to be a little army man. And Paul Howell's been doing it this week, and he's been in his little army fatigues and his helicopter pretending he's a little army man. So there's something desperately pathetic about it all. And I don't know why MPs insist on pretending to be in the army. Maybe they're inspired by Zelensky.
So you're going to say, did he give you a helmet when he got out of his helicopter?
Oh yeah, because there was that that thing, like the dark helmet moment from Spaceballs, wasn't there, where Rishi Sunak had that massive hat on. Yeah.
Look to you, Paul, from Paul Howell. I'm going to be talking about Paul Howell later, so we'll come to him. Thank you. Jane, I mean, sort of your moment of the week was you cleaned the bathroom, cooked
Wow.
the dinner, sort of.
Moment of the week. I
Not
was
gonna be?
enlightened by a Tory MP who stood up in Parliament and let us all know that there's a worldwide socialist conspiracy for 15-minute cities, which is threatening our very being. So as a socialist, this was news to me. So it's a good thing he told us about it. So Oxford City Council is trying to get in place a system whereby people can get to their work, hospitals, facilities, shops within 15 minutes of their home, which I understand is terrifying. But as someone who lived in Oxfordshire for a lot of years and had to take a day off of work and have a 6-hour round trip with a series of buses and trains to get to a dentist appointment and a 5-hour round trip commute every day, I'm quite pleased at the thought that you might be able to get to these places in 15 minutes and not spend your whole day catching expensive public transport. So sounds good to me.
Who was the MP?
I didn't recognise him, and I think probably I'm not too interested in anything else he said, if I'm honest, so I didn't look it up.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing with Tory MPs now. It's sort of blame Jeremy Corbyn. So that's the answer. The extremist lefties, we're the problem. Right, Paul, let's move on.
Now it's time for the big story.
The big story today, people, is the very worrying and concerning events in Knowsley near Liverpool. We have the very person today to tell us all about it. So kick us off. Just Chantal, what happened and give us your thoughts on it.
So Knowsley, wrongfully put in the press as Liverpool, it's part of the Merseyside region, but it's right on the outskirts of Liverpool, and it's one of the areas with the highest levels of some of the highest levels of deprivation in the country. You know, high unemployment, low health outcomes, all of those things. It's where I live. And essentially, there's been a growing far-right recruitment in the area some time, which, you know, some of the organisations like that I run, like Merseyside Alliance for Racial Equality, have been warning councils and, you know, local leaders about for a while that the area is very vulnerable to far-right recruitment. So before the, you know, it's been framed in the press, the riot. So before the riot, the far-right were recruiting in the area, but there was an alleged incident of someone, an adult asylum seeker, sexually harassing a young girl, which was the catalyst for a protest arranged on the Friday. This protest was massively supported and encouraged by the far right. And so in relation to the allegation's been investigated by the police. They released a statement saying it was rumours and misinformation, but even the person involved wasn't at the hotel anymore when the protest took place. They investigated the person out of the country in another city. And so when the protest happened, it quite quickly escalated into violence. There was protesters and counter-protesters. I was on the BBC again correcting a mistake where they were saying that there was a clash between protesters. There wasn't a clash between protesters. There were anti-racists from Merseyside there to support asylum seekers. And then there were other people who were mixed in with the far right, local residents who'd been misdirected in the anger, and then young people who just happened upon it, who kind of escalated things, and the police put themselves between the two groups to stop the other group, which was smaller, the anti-racists, from getting hurt. A police van was completely set on fire. I'm sure a lot of people have seen the videos. People brought hammers and crowbars, you know, to a protest that was advertised as peaceful, and they were aiming fireworks at the hotel, and they were landing on the roof of the hotel with calls of set the hotel on fire. So anyone watching could see that it was terrifying. The people who were there, you know, we've set up a community response, and a lot of the people who were there described it as feeling like a war zone and, you know, feeling very distressed after being there. But essentially, the process was for someone who wasn't there and put, you know, potentially hundreds of people within the hotel, put their lives at risk. It was absolutely shocking. And to understand why it happened, we kind of have to understand that the far right have been in that area for a long time, and it didn't just happen by accident. We've seen leaflets going through people's doors saying you're freezing while people are in a 4-star hotel, and really amping up the hostility towards people in the hotel. So a lot of work's been done locally. We're doing community outreach. We set up an organisation called Merseyside Anti-Racist Unite to really challenge what's happening. We've got a protest on Saturday in Liverpool at 12 o'clock. Anyone can come if you stand against racism in all its forms and if you believe that refugees are welcome here. And we're doing a lot of fact checking and misinformation checking to kind of debunk a lot of the myths that the far right are putting out there in the area.
Thank you very much. I mean, Paul and I found ourselves on a protest in Sunderland, which wasn't as violent, but which was very similar in a way. And it was, there'd been a number of attacks of women in the town centre, and the local people were very concerned about it, and organised a protest march, and it was hijacked by far right. Well, was it the Football Lads or the something like that group? And,
Democratic Football Lads Alliance. That's who they called themselves at the time.
Thank you. And and this grows out of poverty, doesn't it? Poverty and despair and anger, and then you find a scapegoat. And sort of, how serious do you think the rise of the right is in Knowsley? How worried are you about it?
I've been extremely worried for some time. So if we cast our mind back to 2005, Anthony Walker was a young teenager who was black and walking a white girl home and was chased through the streets of Huyton and had an axe put through his head by a racist. Huyton is Knowsley again. It's always been an area that's kind of been a hotbed for, you know, racist sentiment, and always been an area where that risk's been present. But for me, something that was quite telling was, throughout Merseyside, the far right have tried to get into Merseyside in a lot of areas, and quite successfully. A lot of anti-racist groups have kicked them out of the city. You know, there's a famous video where the far right got locked and left luggage and sort of had to leave with the police escort. That happens in a lot of areas. A lot of parts of Merseyside have been successful, but Knowsley not so much. And in 2019, Tommy Robinson came to Merseyside, and the only area where he had a hero's welcome was Huyton. And I found that really heartbreaking, that the one place where we've had a horrendous, serious, heartbreaking murder of a young man, like 15 years later, no work had been done in that area, and it was still somewhere where someone like Tommy Robinson with his, you know, hate-filled views was welcome. But, you know, Liverpool's got a history of lynchings, and a lot of the race riots of the 40s, the early 1900s and the 70s were centred around groups of white mobs going to find black people, dragging them out the houses, either setting fire to the houses, or in Charles Watton's case in 1919, throwing them in the Mersey and pelting them till they drown. So lynch mobs, essentially, and that's what they can become. Once the mob mentality takes over in the way that it did, people's actual lives are at risk. So it's terrifying. And so I'm very worried, and a key part of, you know, addressing this is not just to condemn racism and to condemn the behaviour, but to understand that the behaviour was encouraged by the far right, who are travelling to the area to sort of, you know, to recruit people.
I mean, a lot of the people who are rabble rousing, in fact, come from outside the area, don't they? And they just find a ready ear within the. I read one thing about how terrified the immigrants are. In as much they're almost under house arrest in the hotel. They daren't go out even to the corner shop. I mean, sort of what's being done to keep them safe?
So I visited the hotel site on Saturday. The hotel, so Serco are like the private contractors, aren't they, who do all of the Home Office's bidding. So they've since put a complete metal barrier around the hotel and fences. The police were stationed there, and I believe have been since, and Serco have got security on the gate. And are you correct? While residents can come and go, they're so scared that they don't want to. But also, like, even when I was stood there, and people will usually conceal the racism when talking to a black person for obvious reasons, I was just talking to residents, and some of the things they were saying were just horrendous. Like, you know, everyone in there is a criminal or a paedophile. If you read the Quran, you're a paedophile. And I was just like, this is not correct, you know what I mean? And as I'm saying it, residents are like walking in, and there was loads of hostility. So the information we've had is that although the asylum seekers inside are allowed to go out, they're so scared that they don't want to. And the thing for me is, you know, this kind of folk devil that they've created around it being men who are going to harm women. Some of the people in there, the Knowsley Council released a fact sheet with some of the stories of the asylum seekers in there. Some of them were persecuted for standing up for women's rights as community leaders, and that's why they're here, because they stood up for women's rights. And yeah, there's this whole narrative being pushed that the predators against women. So it's really, they're not being humanized, and they're also now, one of them described it as seeing the same things that it's seen in Syria, like just bombs and fire. And how do you know the difference? It doesn't matter if you're in the UK, you're still seeing fire, an angry crowd, police sirens. It's the same thing.
Get for your life. It's not right. Yes. Many of them want to leave. They want to go somewhere else.
They don't want to stay there.
Horrific what we've become. Thank you so much for that insider knowledge, Chantal. Jane, sort of Suella Braverman has unconditionally condemned the behaviour of the rioters. No excuses. What do you feel of the reaction of the government to these events?
Well, I couldn't find that the Prime Minister's commented on it at all, as far as I can see. And a lot of people were saying that Suella Braverman's response was tantamount to victim blaming, because she was keen to mention in there about alleged behaviour of some asylum seekers. And her own rhetoric, which she said in the lead up, I think it was only a week ago, she spoke about an invasion on the southern coast, which is an incredibly strong thing to say. It's, that's going to cause panic and fear. The language that she has used herself around this subject, around asylum seekers and people seeking refuge in this country, is very damaging, and there's been no apology for that, no acknowledgement of the fact that may have led to an increase in these in a strengthening of the position of the far right at a time when this government is driving in so much inequality through the country. People are in real poverty, people are in really suffering, and that makes people really vulnerable to being manipulated by the far right. And so that they've got these two policies going on which are really dangerous in leading to just this kind of incident, and there's been no acknowledgement of that whatsoever. And I don't think there'll be any change in their policy on that. I think they'll continue to do both those things, make people poorer and say terrible things that stoke far right hatred.
They're doing it on. I mean, do you think that the government is intentionally stoking up the rhetoric and turning hatred towards the immigrant community because they know that this is an area that, in fact, gives them support? Do you think that they don't give a damn about human beings? What do you think of the government's motivation here?
I'm really loath to say that about any human being, and I know we need to be very careful about, not dehumanising MPs, but it is extremely difficult to read anything else into the way that many prominent members of this government are acting in what they do say and in what they don't say, and in their policies, the Rwanda policy, which is absolutely, it's horrific. There's not even any logic behind it. It's terrible, and I think I can only imagine that the refugees and asylum seekers are a convenient scapegoat for a government who realises that they've not got many more straws to clutch if they want to continue to hold government.
I mean, there's an organisation called British Future, which sounds as though it might be a right-wing body, but it's a think tank, and they've come out and they've said that it's not just that the government is doing positive things which clear the patch of immigrants, but it's what they're not doing, which is the real problem. There's no asylum process. There's no places for where asylum seekers can settle and integrate into the community, and there's no safeguards. And this is, of course, what we're talking about for these poor people who basically are just in prison now. Essentially imprisoned by the community. I mean, do you see any way out of this apart from get rid of them and bring another government in?
Yeah, I definitely we need a different government, don't we? I don't see these people changing their policy. Everything they do, every single little thing that they do is just it's the wrong thing to do in this situation. The fact that they have underfunded the system so that it's taking so long. I think I read 8 years sometimes to process people's claims, and these people are living in limbo in the meantime. The fact that they're insisting on housing vulnerable people in hotels, which is completely inappropriate, probably not the main point, but probably a very expensive way to get them the worst possible sort of accommodation for their needs, and at the same time projecting a public image that these people are somehow on holiday and living it up. It all seems very designed to me, so I can't imagine them doing anything. It really seems like we need to change your government to stop this.
Scratching a very dangerous itch. Some lovely comments from people. Thank you so much. Jacqueline Hemmings is thinking back to the rise of the BNP and the worries we had about that. Tim Dredge gives us a whole load of information about how Patriotic Alternative are holding events in Leeds and Hull and York and Rotherham and Castleford. This is a deep worry. Because the sort of all these tensions. Mia Mantri points out the similarity between the reaction to the trans community and the reaction to the immigrants, in as much as there's a sort of your children aren't safe kind of approach to this. And Jacqueline Hemming says it's distraction. If we're worrying about other demographics, we're not thinking about the economic mess, which sort of leads you to wonder. Paul, if I can just come to you finally. I mean, we've talked with Jane about whether the government's reaction is sufficient. But what about the Labour Party? We said is the answer to get rid of the government and bring in the Labour Party. But what's the Labour Party's stance on this? And is that adequate to the problem?
I think the worry for me in the Labour Party is that they are completely saying the wrong things all the time, despite the fact that they know the damage they can cause. So a lot of the things that people say are out of ignorance. A lot of the things that, the rhetoric we see, like stoked by the right-wing media, has scared the Labour Party into thinking, okay, well, we're going to have to somehow appease these. They'll probably call them small c conservatives. I generally tend to call them small r racists. And the Labour Party are trying to appeal to those people, and you can see that. So Angela Rayner was interviewed on, I think it was Good Morning Britain by Judge Rinder, Judge Rinder, whatever you call him, and he was pressing her on whether or not refugees should be tagged. He was calling them illegal immigrants, which again is that she should have pulled him up on that language as well, because there's no such thing as an illegal immigrant, and there was no talk of anything about safe routes. There was no talk about any of these people being actually people. He wanted to know whether or not the Labour Party supported tagging those people, which, we've seen this in history when refugees or certain people who are from certain backgrounds were tagged in certain ways. And the Labour Party definitely, yes, do support that, because Keir Starmer said it and Angela Rayner came out and said it, that they do support tagging of refugees. Now, that kind of thing, politicians have a responsibility.
And just to interrupt you, Paul, and get myself thrown out of the Labour Party, I can see no difference between tagging immigrants and plonking a yellow star on them.
That's what I was alluding to, and maybe I should have just come out and said that. But I suppose it's not as serious as the utterly horrific events of the Holocaust, but it might be a stepping stone on the way to something similar. The dehumanization of people. But as a politician, if you know that can be extremely damaging, but you say it anyway, and Angela Rayner does know that that's extremely damaging, because I've been at events that she's heard people talking about how damaging it is to dehumanize people. So she knows it's dehumanizing to tag people and put tags on them to make them feel like, you know, that they've done something wrong, rather than helping them, rather than talking about safe routes, rather than talking about, like, you know, there's so much to do in this country. If you look around, do you think, tell you what, this is a utopia. Every job is done. You've got people who've moved over who would be really keen to work, whether that's in our NHS, whether it's in our social care system, and they're being kept in a hotel and like locked up as prisoners, rather than being saying, you know what, we could give you a national insurance number and you could go and work, and you could go and like pay tax and do all these things and contribute to society in the many wonderful ways they could. Instead, they're treated as inhumans, you know, as something separate to our humanity. It's absolutely disgusting. Sometimes, like, I look at the Conservative Party and I think, you know what, you're thick as mince. You don't know the damage you cause with your words. But what's worse, knowing the damage that you cause and then saying it anyway, you know, because you think you might get some votes. I just want to say, like, finish on one point here. The Labour Party have very, very clearly picked a side here. And I've very clearly picked a side as well. I am pro-humanity. I'm pro-everyone, you know, having a nice, comfortable, healthy life where everyone's freedoms are respected. The Labour Party want to be authoritarian. They want to tag people. And they're doing it in the name of the members, without consulting the members. Would the membership have put this through a conference? This is a horrific, horrific policy that they're willing to do. And if you're a Labour Party member now, they're doing it in your name. So you've, in a way, picked a side as well. Like, if you continue to support the Labour Party now, that's like, I'm saying it's on the members. If the members are willing to be in that same bracket, then that's up to them. You know, they've chosen a side.
Thank you very much, Paul. Mia agrees with you. She doesn't think anything will change very much under Labour. Laura Lee Daly. Hi, Laura. There's only so many times you can claim to be on the left and play the game till you're in power before you just become one of them. Leanne, Labour Party are lost. They're trying to speak the language to appeal to the right-wing rhetoric. I was out knocking doors the other day, and I met a lifelong Conservative government voter who says, well, I'm a bit fed up at the moment with them. They need to get themselves sorted out. But I'll tell you what, he says, I like that guy Starmer. He talks my language. And he just thought, well, is that something to be proud of? I mean, is that something that we're going to rejoice about? Just moving on, Neil Terry points out that they're only illegal because we haven't allowed any legal ways for them to come into the country. And Jacqueline Hemming, so I wonder if refugees feel angry that they've been driven out of their homes, away from their communities and families, and then we expect these men, women and children to feel grateful to be allowed to live in this country and get treated like rubbish. Thank you very much for everybody. I think we're all in agreement. And Paul, let's move on. Now, you'll notice that earlier, Paul didn't let me break in and segue smoothly into this next question, but he was talking about some of the awful people that sort of on the Tory side, and now we're going to talk about one of them, and his name's Lee Anderson, and they've appointed him as deputy chair. Jane, on a scale of 1 to Priti Patel, sort of how repulsive is Lee Anderson as a human being?
Oh, so this is a horrible question though, John, because he's got some horrible opinions, and he's said some horrible, offensive things that are very upsetting. But I'm really conscious that I don't want to I don't want to.
We need you as Prime Minister.
Dehumanize this man.
Better than that Ardern. Carry on then. What say about him all the same?
So this gentleman who has become the new deputy chair of the Conservative Party So he's calling for the return of the death penalty on the quite flippant basis, actually, that no one's ever committed a crime after being executed. I don't think it's the kind of subject you should really be joking about. He'd like to send refugees back to France on Royal Navy frigates, and according to the Big Issue article I was reading, made quite offensive comment about it being better than being in their manky tents. He said that people use food banks because they can't cook and can't budget, then boasted about being able to afford meals at 30p a time. And then more recently, he's tweeted a 16 pence breakfast idea with some supermarket brand Weetabix and milk. He put out a tweet recently about a female staffer of his who, although she earns under 30k and spends half her income on renting a room in London and travelling to work, manages to go on foreign holidays and doesn't use food banks, I think in a snipe to the nurses who are having to live in absolute poverty. And he issued a fake election video, or what I'd call a fake election video, where I think he went out with Channel 4 and he was caught on microphone admitting and talking on the phone to someone posing as being a swing voter who was in fact a friend of his. So he's not a great person. I think he did an interview on Radio Nottingham this week talking about that election video, and he didn't come across well there either. He was very cagey, tried to catch the host out, and then told her not to put the thing out on air. He doesn't seem like a great person. He doesn't actually seem very representative of the working classes. Because if you're working class, I would have thought that you'd understand that actually you can't live on 30p a meal, and that, paying half your income to rent a room in London is not the way that it's okay for people to be expected to live.
I've got, he hates Care for Calais, he supports smacking children, he believes that you ought to set water cannon on protesters. He thinks that unemployed people ought to be made to go and live in a tent in the field and pick potatoes. He boycotted the football because he hated the footballers taking the knee, and has very extreme opinions about people coming across in small boats. The man has the most disgraceful opinions. Jacqueline Hemmings, I'm just as guilty, but we give him too much attention. She thinks he's just saying these things to be outrageous because he lacks the talent to do a good job. So the only way he can get himself noticed is by saying outrageous things. I don't think so, Jacqueline. I just think that some people just are awful. Paul, why has Sunak selected this guy? I mean, the Guardian pointed out that there are a load of red wall MPs who actually understand the needs of the working class, who could say things which would sort of not just appeal to the Tory right, but would actually appeal to the working class voters who put them where they are. Why has Sunak chosen this person?
Because he's a reactionary idiot. So what he'll do is he'll go on Twitter and he'll get himself involved in some pretty weird conversations, and he'll go down his local pub and he'll speak to his friends, who I think he's got some quite well-known far-right friends, who he was very famously in a video with, when he rang him up and he was like, "Oh, pretend you've never heard of me before, and you're a former Labour voter and stuff." Can you remember that video that came out where he pretended to be his friend pretended to be a former Labour voter? But anyway, this guy used to work for the Labour Party. He worked for Gloria De Piero. She obviously thought he was like, she liked the cut of his jib. These people are back in charge of the Labour Party again. It's that revolving door of politics, isn't it? It's these kind of nasty people getting themselves involved in the political scene. And this guy, not all working class opinions are true and correct, and not all working class people are nice. There can be some very, very nasty things going through, just like any section of any community. Like any group of people will have some really lovely people, will have some really awful people in, and Lee Anderson appeals to that really nasty, blaming everything on immigrants. The Sun reader, kind of mentality. You know, he's very much in that kind of area where, like, you know, someone who reads the Sun, someone who goes on right-wing Twitter, they'll quite like what he says, and that's why Sunak's put him in charge of the Tory party, despite everyone knowing that he's an absolute whopper. You know, they'll still support him.
Thank you. Chantal, one, I'd like to know what the reaction to this guy is in your area, and whether sort of Paul is right in that there's a kind of an element in Knowsley and Huyton that would respond to Lee Anderson. And the second thing is I want to ask you, what would you, how do we react to this guy? Do we rise to the bait? Do we ignore him like Jacqueline was suggesting? So one, does this guy have any traction in your area? And two, how do we need to deal with him?
To be honest, I've heard his name's been floated around, and I saw the video of him basically saying the asylum seekers should be treated a little bit like slaves on fields, just made to work from tents. And I was just like, is this I didn't realise at the time he was an actual politician. I just thought he was like some far-right figure, and I was like, oh, that's... And then I looked, and I was like, oh no, he's actually, you know, the deputy leader of the Conservative Party. That is awful. I think we shouldn't dismiss people like Lee Anderson, because if you remember, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago, Boris Johnson was that quirky person who might call, you know, Muslim women people with telephone boxes, or might call black people watermelon smiles. And he really pushed that soft racism forward. Whereas now, they're just out and out racist. You know, 10 years ago, what Boris was saying was shocking. And now we've got someone trying to one-up Boris with the racism and the far-right rhetoric. I don't think we should dismiss them, because it's often those charismatic, let's call them, characters who are willing to say anything, you know, the Piers Morgans, the Jeremy Clarksons, who do engage people. And it's not so much about facts but personality. So I think we should be challenging people like that. We should be challenging the narrative and exposing them as liars, because that's something that they don't like, when they're exposed in the lies and, you know, when they're caught lying. But I think we should be very, very, keep our eyes on them and be very mindful of the impact that they do have.
One of the things that's come up in this programme a lot, and I challenge Chantal, is that we catch people out as liars and we think, there we are, we scored a point. I don't think many people out there nowadays give a fig about politicians lying. I think they think that all politicians lie, and they're not right bothered about it. Yeah,
the issue is it's the speed of it, isn't it? Like, social media is so quick. And this is one of the, you know, big things that the Conservatives used to win the election. Most of their campaigns were found to have, like, were fact checks, and most of the facts they were presenting weren't true. Most of the figures that they were presenting weren't true. But by the time those figures and facts and that hysteria that they got people, you know, thinking they were going to lose the businesses and homes, if Corbyn got in, by the time people have fact-checked that, those memes were out there, those posts were out there. No one really wanted to know that the thing they saw 5 days ago wasn't actually true and wasn't actually correct. So it's like, often people are in a place of chasing the tails, but that's where social media really has to act. So those posts shouldn't get out there at the point of posting. If something's not correct, you know, if we look at like COVID, you could put a filter on, they put a filter on things and instantly knew if something was incorrect, if people were sharing misinformation, or a warning went up on the post. Why can't you do that in politics? That affects every part of our everyday lives. So if people and political parties are spreading fake news, they should have a warning on too.
Thank you. That's a great, I mean, that's absolutely the case. Some lovely comments. Some people pointing out that Anderson was in the Labour Party. I was in the Labour Party long enough to know that there was always a fascist wing to the Labour Party. Neil Terry says he's a political outrider proposing policies at a distance. Laura Lee Daly agrees with me. The issue is that these liars, even when exposed, double down until it becomes fact, it be accepted. Mia Mantry, same idea. We're not surprised when people are lying. Neil Terry says 100% spot on, Chantal. Remember Cambridge Analytica. And Laura Lee Daly's going to dig out episodes we did months and months ago. That'll be frightening. It will look much younger. Okay, and oh no, Jane, you've gone and you've done a jig.
Sorry, I got chucked out.
Oh, that's sort of it's the things you say. The last question. Paul, who is stupid enough to think that we are stupid enough to believe that the Chinese are stupid enough to spy something so stupid as a weather balloon?
I don't know. I think everyone, I think they're playing games with one another with regards to these weather balloon UFOs and things like that. It could be like, it isn't the most sophisticated piece of machinery, but apparently the USA are using weather balloons to spy on China. This is a thing that they're doing at the moment. I'm more interested in the other stuff because, to be honest, I'm a little bit of a nerd, and I like things like UFOs, and it's been really interesting to see the reaction of people to what they're saying. It seems that the USA are becoming closer and closer and closer to saying, look, these UFO things are real. Not the weather balloon ones. The weather balloon ones we can explain. But over the past few years, they've been releasing more and more pieces of footage and more things from fighter pilots, as in there are things flying around that we don't know what they are. We can't explain the technology, and they are releasing these things, and no one's commenting on it. It's almost like there's this really soft kind of thing where they're going to tell us that there really are some sort of advanced aircrafts that we don't know what is going on with. So yeah, there's some fun stuff, and I watched a documentary lately on a fella named Bob Lazar who worked at Area 51. But it wasn't Area 51 actually, it was somewhere called S20, which was close to Area 51, and he claims to have worked on a UFO that the USA had. That they have a number of them, and he's like, it sounds implausible, but there's no reason for him to have made it up as well. It's really, really weird. But look him up. He's really interesting. But he claimed that one of them was actually archaeological, and they dug it up. They dug up this UFO that had been under the ground for a period of time, and they were trying to understand the technology and reverse engineer all these things. So I don't know. There's something really, really interesting going on. What I believe is that they think that other countries have some really advanced technology that they don't understand, and they would not be shooting them down with a daft dart. I know they're spending £400,000 per cruise missile to shoot down these balloons, but basically you could pop them with a dart, couldn't you? The ones that they're talking about, that the military is saying, that the Air Force is saying that they can, couldn't possibly be caught like that. They wouldn't be hit with a missile. They're moving in very strange directions. They're going under the sea. They're doing all sorts of things. So yeah, there's some really interesting stuff out there, and talking about UFOs is fun.
Yes, but not really very socialist, Paul.
It is. I'd be maybe I don't think an advanced society could have got here without working together and being a bit socialist. If they had a capitalist planet, they would have destroyed it by now, wouldn't they? And they wouldn't have ever got to that point. There would have been a barrier to them being successful in doing intergalactic travel. So therefore, I'm assuming that these aliens will be socialists, especially considering they're not reacting badly to being shot down.
Is the answer. They may have tricks for us. Can I return to reality? Chantal, why do you think that the USA is doing this now? These things have been flying across for years and flying across other countries without any comment. Why are they making this fuss?
I think because since the pandemic, we're all just ready for anything. Before 2020, it would have been, oh my God, aliens, what are we going to do? But, we've had a full-on global pandemic. the world is crumbling around us in terms of the global climate crisis, and then like just all of society, we can't even keep a good like a leader for more than a couple of weeks, and it's just like I feel like if you just told people now, you know, well, aliens are here, it'll just be like, nah, just like no one. Like, okay then.
Oh, really? Right, yes. Sort of. I'll tell you what we do if the aliens came, we put them in a hotel and put a big wall around them and they wouldn't dare come out.
Tag him. Get him tagged. That'll show him.
So that we're being irreverent here. Do you think that trying desperately to bring us back to some kind of semblance of serious political discussion? What political game is the USA playing here? They're virtually at war with Putin, and now they're picking a fight with China. What's going on in their heads, do you think?
I have no idea. I'm very worried about it though. I'm very kind of like, I don't know if we will get to the end of the 2020s without there being a significant war. But China are one of the biggest growing economies. They've got a lot of power, but also, are you all aware of the modern scramble for Africa? So there's a new scramble for Africa, essentially trying to get all of Africa's resources and you know continuing to exploit the continent. China are leading in the scramble to Africa, so they're like right in there. They're getting oil, they've got infrastructures, you know they've got this whole economy set up in Africa. So China's building itself as a superpower, and the USA was the old superpower. So maybe it's just a case of they're having a little look and thinking, well, you are the ones who are going to pose a huge threat to us. Because yeah, they are building and they are well exploiting the African continent too while they're doing that.
I'm certainly think that they see China as a superpower rival, but my own experience from history is that when you find a government banging the foreign policy drum like this, the fear of the country outside, it's because they have fears about what's happening inside their own country, and it's a way to unite a country by positing a foreign invasion, a kind of a 1984 kind of way. Jane, and of course, then the next thing that happens, despite the fact that we don't have any balloons flying crazily across our country, Rishi Sunak comes on the television and announces that he's got us safe from balloons. We don't need to worry about balloons on his watch. What the hell do you think's going on there?
So I think it's like you're saying, he's deflecting from the absolute mess they've made in this country, from the abject poverty people are living in, from the destruction of our public services and NHS. And I noticed that he said that we will do whatever it takes to keep the country safe. And I would caveat that to say that is everything except to make sure that people have access to food, heat, light, a home, medical care and workers' rights. But we've got planes and we can shoot things.
Well said, Jane. God bless you. Jacqueline Hemmings says it's the Cold War all over again. Having lived through the Cold War, Jacqueline, it has one major difference. And that major difference is that in the Cold War, we actually hated the other side and had nothing to do with them. And you had a Berlin Wall and an Iron Curtain. Now, the sort of corporate bodies, the money men, the money markets, they're just continuing trading as though there's no conflict at all. What we're experiencing now is a dummy conflict that's created by governments sort of at each other's throats to try and keep control of their own countries, whilst this establishment, this market establishment, this capitalist establishment, this neoliberal establishment just keep on making money and stashing it away, and we daren't do anything about them at all. They're the real enemy, not the bloody Russians and the Chinese, to be honest, if the truth be told. that brings us to an end with a little chunter from me. Thank you for letting me have a say in not interrupting the silly old man. I do have to say, Chantal, it's just been a delight to have you on. Thank you so much for your insight into our main story, particularly, and thank you for coming on. It's always a delight. We're privileged. Jane, is a sort of, you're my hero, and brilliant yet again. And Paul, yes, good. The creativity and thought is an important aspect of all our lives. And God bless you. We all know you're the boss, and you're Mr. Wonderful. So, can you see us out, Paul, and say goodbye to everybody?
Yeah, sure. It's nice to be the kind of eccentric one every now and then, who believes in conspiracy theories and things like that. But yeah, it's fun. But yeah, we would like you to become a member of Socialist Think Tank. We'd like you to donate because we could do with a little bit of financial support at the moment. Don't break the bank or anything like that, but that would be quite a nice thing. I think I'd be wrong to not do that, wouldn't I, Jane? So yeah, just to help keep the show going financially, that would be really good. We don't take very much at all, but it would be nice to cover our costs. So yeah, donate to us, please. Subscribe to us on all our social media channels, and and if you want to buy a t-shirt or something like that, that's always good. Spread the word amongst people as well about how to make sure that the people who need to hear the message of solidarity, of international solidarity, of the idea that humans are just humans and nobody is illegal. This is all we hear, and in the political world, all we hear is division, and you've got allegedly both sides of the political divide. You've got the right-wing party and the slightly more right-wing party both agreeing to tag refugees and things like that. It's absolutely appalling what is going on at the moment, so we need to be the ones spreading the word, ordinary people, because most people do believe in human beings having rights to just live their lives, and I think that's what is being totally overlooked in every other form of media other than independent media. Thank you so much to everyone for coming on. It's been an absolute honour to be on with you. Thanks to you, John, because you always thank us, and you deserve thanks as well. We'll see you all soon, and yeah, that's it from me. Take care, everyone.
God bless you. Thank you. Bye.
Keep the red flag flying.